Maple Bitcoin featuring Robin Sire. Let's go live, guys. I was thinking about something. I thought that maybe the comment section can influence somehow our topics that we're choosing, because I think there are amazing things happening in the comment section after the video also, and from the live chat. So this is what I basically did. I looked through all the comments from last week's live stream, and I saw that this is a very popular one, and a thing that I get a lot of comments every day about. So let's get started. Joe, Roger, Forrest, what are you guys thinking on retirement and Bitcoin?
First of all,
I think going to address something here.
Yeah, I think it's really important that 65sats won a portrait of me that's autographed. And I didn't even volunteer for it. I just got voluntold. I think Jor is going to get that shipped out to you.
I'll have to get your e-signature on it, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I like that.
DocuSign.
Yeah.
Okay, no, it's a good topic today. We got the right crew for this today. Unfortunately, Brandon's not here today. He might show up though. He said he's a possibility still, but we got the retirement experts in the house today. So yeah, I mean, this is a pretty popular subject. I think that there's a lot of people out there, a lot of Bitcoiners especially, who see Bitcoin as their main retirement fund. I do anyways. Before Bitcoin, for me, it was my rental property that I had. You know, I just kind of subscribe to the theory that I'm never going to get anything from the government in the form of a pension. I don't have a job anymore. I think a lot of people will be in that same, realm within the next couple of years. So Bitcoin's what I got. And luckily, I think I got a lot of runway left in life. I got a lot of time to accumulate with the big mismatch between reality and where we are today. You can buy a lot of sats for not a whole lot of dollars. So the people here watching this today, if you can figure out a way to just hold on to your sats, I think you should be good. Assuming you're under the age of like 50 or something. But yeah, I think we haven't seen the real growth in Bitcoin. And I think that it's going to surprise a lot of people based on all the predictions, projections, thumbnails of how much you need. But, I just think that if you got any amount right now, you're probably going to be good. The longer you can hold it, the better you're going to be.
Yeah. And the way I look at it is there's sort of three ways to get income, and it's from wages, transfers, and capital. And as Joris said, he doesn't suspect that he's going to get anything from the government when he plans to, when he's older and plans to retire or whatever, right? And so that would be the transfer side, right? That's the government taking from one, transferring to the other. It could be, who knows what the future looks like with AI. There could be sort of like a tax on robots instead of a tax on humans. Maybe. It would lower the incentives for innovation within there. So who knows? But if you are planning to retire, and I think it's actually a good idea to look at that structure, that sort of tripod, wages, transfers, and capital, and see where there's some instability there. And wages is one, and transfers is another. Pretty unstable, in my opinion.
Yes.
You might lose your job. Your job might disappear. If you're depending on transfers, Social Security, these kind of things. Who knows what that's going to be worth? Who knows how well funded that is? It's all sort of funded by the next generation, which the generations change and aren't, as able to pay for the last generations and all of that. So the other one there that I would think is the most stable is capital. And so if you build up that capital bucket for your income, then you're able to actually rely on that. You're able to lean on that part of the tripod a lot more. And so the best capital in the world is Bitcoin. And it can be as simple. You can go way more complex and way more efficient, but it can be as simple as just acquiring as much capital today in the form of Bitcoin and using that capital in the future when you need to, through the form of selling or exchanging for the things that you need to live. It can be that simple. It can be more complex with loan structures and all sorts of different things. But that's the way I look at it, just to get a sort of a base foundation of the financial reality of retirement.
Yeah. So yesterday I actually made a video where I was going in depth on this. It was basically how to retire 10 years earlier than you had expected. So the traditional system tells you, oh, you have to retire at 65. We'll fund your retirement. We'll give you pensions. We'll give you this and that. And everything is basically just designed to get you to work as long as possible. So in that video, I basically went through this graphic, how to have all of these and actually retire. Because if you don't have these, if you don't have any of these, then you can't retire. If you don't have the choice to go to work, then you're not retired. If you don't have enough money to cover your expenses forever, you're not retired. If you don't have freedom, you're not retired because somebody else owns your time. They're paying, the highest bidder is basically just paying you for your time. So if you can set your own schedule, that is retirement. And if you can't set your schedule, you are stuck. You're basically a slave. You don't have any power over your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sorry, you guys talk. I'm actually going to try to find this tweet. I just found a tweet the other day that perfectly summed that up, and you guys can go back to me.
What do you think, Robin? Like, how's the situation looking over there in terms of like young people relying on the government or their pensions?
It's especially frustrating because I don't know how it is in Canada, but I know there are options that you opt out of your 401k in America. I know there are options, for example, also in Australia to do a self-directed pension. We don't have that option in Austria.
We don't have it either in Canada.
Yeah, in Canada also.
Or do we?
Like,
do we have self-directed retirement funds in Canada?
Yeah, we have RSPs. We have RSP, TFSA. You can put whatever you want.
I guess that's what would be. I
just
think of like a. Sorry, Rajat, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say you can put whatever you want in there.
And
right. I kind of get it confused with like the IRAs in the US because they can actually like self-custody Bitcoin in there. I don't think Canadians have any ability to do that.
Yeah,
No.
you can't do that.
And the thing is, like, so like I'm self-employed in Austria, and even as a self-employed person, I cannot choose where I put my retirement money. I have three options, which are free funds that are made from 3 different banks for retirement. So there's like the official retirement thing that you have to pay in anyways with your social insurance. But then there is an additional one that you have to pay in, and there you can choose 3 different funds that are all kind of doing the same thing. It's literally like the same the same shit, just like with 3 different labels from 3 different banks. I cannot even get strategy in my retirement account. I cannot buy a Bitcoin ETF. Like I can buy those things, but it has to be with money that I could also just buy spot Bitcoin with. With the retirement money that the state takes from me, I cannot do anything. It's just like there. And that's really frustrating for me. And so that's what I said, like it's a double frustrating situation, because on the one hand, you know that this money might not be there. I just calculate with no money being there at my retirement. If I get anything from the pension system when I quote unquote retire, I don't know if I ever do that actually, but if I retire and I want to settle down on something and not work, I really can't see a future where I do that, but I might change my mind when I'm like 60 or 70 years old. I don't calculate with any money from the states and the governments, and if there is some money coming from the governments, I'll take it. But I have to pay in. So I have to pay in, but
even if you're
I'm not sure if it gets out.
Even if you're self-employed, you have to pay into it?
Yeah, you cannot get out of it. Like
Really?
You can only get out of it kinda if you have a company and you employ yourself in the company and only pay yourself like a very small salary, and then take income from borrowing against your company to get like indirect income. But as soon as you get some kind of income, being at self-employed, just like normally employed, you have to pay that. Like you cannot opt out, and that's such a bad thing. Like I hate when like you're forced to do your pension, because why should I? Like,
exactly.
I get taxed to a certain degree because you want to help everyone. Like, but like the pension is just for me. Like why am I forced to invest in it if it's just for me? Are you not trusting me with my own money? Like that does not make sense.
They got to keep the system going though, man. Like
Exactly.
that's why it happens. No, for real. Like that's why they take all these automatic deductions off of people's retirement funds, and just like most people have no idea where it's going. But that's the continuous demand for their system. That's what it is, because you're continuously feeding it. You don't want these products, but they're forcing you to buy them, which is an artificial way of inflating the prices and making everybody think they're more valuable. So, if everybody stopped paying their pension, it would just go like this. It would deflate because there's no more demand for it anymore. So I think that's what it is, Robin. It's like they need that to keep the whole system going.
It's a forced Ponzi scheme because the people, I mean, you're basically inflating the assets, because there will be a certain age when people that have invested into these 3 funds that they're allowed to, or that they're forced to invest into, are withdrawing from that. So you're inflating the assets for them to withdraw on it. And you're hoping that people that subscribe and actually believe in this are hoping the next generation does it for them. And the government is forcing them to do it. It's not an opt-in. It's a forced Ponzi scheme. That should be criminal. Like that's insane, in my opinion.
But it's the same way in Canada, or you can opt out?
You don't have to do that. No. I mean, there's certain taxes as an employee that you're forced into, like Canadian pension plan and things like that. But as far as like a retirement fund, no, you don't. You can do whatever you want with your RSP.
Yeah, you can have self-directed accounts. You can have managed accounts. You can have brokerages manage your accounts for you, all your assets. They're probably not going to put you in Bitcoin though.
No, but you can buy IBIT, you can buy MSTR in an RSP. There's no withholding tax if you buy US stocks. I mean, the problem is that you're just delaying the tax in an account like that. So, I mean, if you plan on being wealthier when you're old, I mean, it's basically designed for people that think that they're not going to be wealthy when they're older, and they're going to have lower tax bracket than they are now as a working individual. So it's a little bit not as great as people think it is, but it's something.
Yeah, and it might actually also be an interesting topic, because I think retirement is, and like Rashad's briefly showed it on the screen, like what is retirement? Because I think this is a very important thing, because people think like, I just want to retire to do nothing. But retirement for me just means optionality, where you go ahead and say like, okay, I do no longer have to do that work, and I can focus on something better.
Yeah, that's that first note that Rajat had on his presentation. There was work optional. I think that's really what retirement means, is work optional. I think you have more freedom to be able to choose what you want to do. And a lot of people in their golden years, they'll start kind of doing things they're really passionate about, and put extra money that they have towards their passion projects, which funds all sorts of innovation as well. I think it's understated actually how much you can do when maybe you're not as physically able to do things potentially.
I mean, how many guys, actually somebody in the chat, Chaffa 888, nice number there. You cannot self-custody Bitcoin and IRA in the US. Maybe it's not the IRA, but I'm pretty sure you can with Unchained. Have you guys not heard that before, where you can take self-custody of Bitcoin through your retirement account?
Yeah, Swan and Unchained both offer it, and they Unchained is actually a self-custody IRA, whereas Swan is like a real collaborative thing.
Right.
So yeah, you can do that. Definitely.
How many people do you guys have in your life that are baby boomers that retired like before the 2020 and now are working again? I have family that have gone back to work that are like 60 some years old. They retired and they go back to work, which is hilarious to me, because like it seems to me a lot of baby boomers, especially here in Canada, I can't speak on the US, but a lot of baby boomers, because they're still so tuned into like the mainstream narrative, they're like happy with the Liberal government. And it's just like, Do you guys have any idea how much of your life has been stolen by these people? They don't put two and two together. Like the 40% money printed in the last 5 years is like, that basically took a baby boomer's life, 15 years of their working lives. They just took it away from them by printing that much money. And they're just like don't even notice. They don't know. They don't connect the dots. They're just like satisfied. Okay, I'll go back to work. And again, the point of retirement here is like, if you're 65 and you want to do something, like if you just want to go work again, just to stay active and keep your mind working, that's one thing. But when you're like forced to go back to work because you can't pay your bills, because the living expenses are too high and your fixed income isn't enough, that's what we're running into. I think we're going to see more and more of it over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I don't know anybody personally, but I know that my nightmare is dying on the floor of Walmart. And, like, I think that's how a lot of people should start thinking, because, and when they do, they start thinking, okay, what are the other options? And as you stated there, fixed income, like, is not something you can rely on. It's something that is fixed, and it's not going to go up with inflation. So as the cost of living goes up, the most vulnerable are the people with the least amount of control over their income. And when you're on fixed income, you have no control over that income. Voting harder is not going to help, and Carney's not going to save you, and you're screwed. You're screwed. There's so many people. Like I'm fortunate enough not to know anybody that has to go back to work, like in your situation there, Jor. But I know, like, you go to stores, you see really elderly people that would probably rather do something else, spend time with their grandkids or travel around, do whatever, right? Like there's very few people out there that are really elderly that really want to work in that way. Like maybe volunteering instead, right? Like just work optional.
That's what
Yeah.
the only thing. Sorry, Rajat. That's the only thing I don't like about Stretch. It's denominated in US dollar, and it's like fixed income. And I'm like, what if something really happens? Like, I'd rather have the self-custody Bitcoin or even the common shares. But sorry, go ahead, Rajat.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of people don't really plan out higher than expected inflation, because
Right.
they just think that inflation is going to be 2%. And like when I worked in the financial industry, that's what we believed. We just thought that was the number. And if somebody's beating 2%, oh, they're doing pretty well. Nobody really addressed it. Nobody really talked about it. And it takes a lot of effort to really get yourself away from that, from thinking that government numbers that governments are telling you are right, and just understanding that inflation is actually a lot worse than people think, and it's not. And then the other side of things, like Jeff Booth's book, where he says technology is deflationary. So over time, we get better at making things. All the things that we're using right now, we get better at making them over time because of skills. We pass on secrets. We don't have to make the same mistakes again. We just get better and better at making things, and because of that, the growth of productivity is exploding. It's exponential, and it'll continue to be, and it'll continue to work this way. So it's not even just that the prices are going up; they should be going down. So people think that prices are only going up 2%, 3% per year. But how much should they be going down? Should they be going down like 15% every year? Should they be going down 25% every year? The only thing that we're seeing is the amount that governments are printing money. Like technological deflation would be a lot. The prices would fall even faster if there wasn't a distorted lens. I guess I would say that the U.S. dollar is like a lens, right? It's a lens. It's a distorted lens, and it makes you think that prices always have to go up. It makes you think that house prices always have to go up, even though, again, we get better at making houses over time. Houses wear and tear. So why do they go up in price? Why are they the only thing that goes up? It's because the dollar is so broken.
Yeah. And I've heard the sort of the argument of like, we've pulled a lot of people out of poverty. There's a lot of people sort of just nominally doing better than they were 50 or 100 years ago. Interest rates used to be higher. All these kind of arguments saying like, just on average, life expectancy and way of life has improved globally. And that's probably true statistically. But, and to really put a wrench in that whole argument of people saying that, it should be even better. Like, the fiat system is
Yes.
siphoning off how good humans are at increasing our technological advances and making everything around us deflationary and more abundant. We're incredibly good at that as a species, and the fiat system is siphoning that extra abundance off and siphoning it to the people closest to the money printer. And we would be even better, right? So like if you know, people are talking about how positive it is that life expectancy and way of life is improved, it should be even better. That's the argument to make.
Yeah, Brandon and I talked about this the other day too. We're like, we should be in the Jetsons, but we're in the Flintstones right now. And even going back to like what you guys were talking about there, like, yes, prices should be going down, but the other crazy part about that too is like if you look at the ingredients that have gone into these products through the years, like home building materials, food, just everything, the laptops, everything is just they're finding the cheapest materials that they can use because they don't want to run up the price too much. The prices are still going up, even though the quality of everything's going down and down and down. It doesn't make any sort of sense when you combine that with the technology. And so thankfully, like you guys said, that's just a lens. That's a way to look at the world and measure the world by. But if you're in Bitcoin, you can actually choose today. It's like people always say, well, when are we going to move to a Bitcoin standard? When's this going to happen? And just like Jeff Booth says, you can do it today. You can start measuring things in Bitcoin, and it's going to make a world of difference through your lens, the way you see the world. Because through a Bitcoin lens, things are actually getting cheaper. Houses. I was talking about the Masters pot the other day. It used to be like 2 million, and then it went to 3 million, then 4 million. But in Bitcoin terms, it went from like 5,000 to 500 to 50 Bitcoin. So everything through that lens is actually coming down. It's just that the majority of people don't see the world that way yet.
Yeah, and once they start seeing it that way, it's gonna change everything because they own houses that are massively overvalued in terms of Bitcoin. They own stocks which are also massively like, and what they're gonna start. I think what people are gonna start doing, and this is probably the next step of adoption. People will probably continue to see it as a store of value, but they're gonna start borrowing against their houses and their stocks to buy Bitcoin because they're gonna realize this is the only asset that you can take away with you. So if the price of the house goes down, or let's say, for example, if something happens where I have to sell the house, that's perfectly fine. I still have my Bitcoin. If I have to sell my stocks or if I get margin called, that's perfectly fine. I still have my Bitcoin. So I think that understanding of where the understanding of how valuable this thing is, where you can take it across borders, it can't be controlled by governments, it can't be stopped. All of that is going to come together, and people are going to get into all this untapped equity that they have in literally everything, stocks, real estate, bonds. They're going to put that untapped equity into Bitcoin, and that's probably what's going to lead to some massive growth over the next decades, because that's probably the most important source of wealth. I mean, you can say everything you want about new money being printed, but that money has to circulate through the economy, and it has to go through different businesses. The money that's already available and it's already there is what's going to make that difference. And again, we're talking about retirement. I think that what Bitcoin does is it gives you that stable future to plan with. You know that there's only 21 million Bitcoin. You have no idea how many dollars will exist. So that's probably going to be something that also helps people to get to retirement.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I had a house, I would borrow against it and buy Bitcoin. Like I wouldn't think twice about it. Instead, I sold my home and bought Bitcoin. So I just did that instead, took out as much value as I could immediately. But interest rates are artificially low because of the money printer as well. Like there's less risk on a lender because they know they can get bailed out. Essentially, they know there's going to be that money is going to get easier to acquire, and so they can. And basically, it creates this competitive environment to lower interest rates as much as possible because the money printer is there as a backstop. So take advantage of that. Like interest rates are artificially low. Bitcoin is completely scarce. I mean, that just makes sense because those two things are going to be revalued. The market's eventually going to say, you know what, I'm taking. If things are backed by Bitcoin at some point, I can't lend at these rates because it's too risky to my Bitcoin. right? The hurdle rate is Bitcoin. It becomes too risky when something isn't backstopped, and everything has to be revalued. We might even like look at a different style of financing, right? Like in his Islamic law, they don't have interest rates. You can't charge somebody interest. But what you can do instead is you can buy an asset and then give it to the person who wants to buy it, and then charge them essentially a inflated price that they pay in installments. So you could do something like that where you actually own the asset and then you resell it for more in installments. There's actual ownership behind that. There's an actual asset behind that. It's not just inflated, created money out of nowhere.
Right.
So I
It's
don't
a
know.
big difference.
It's gonna reshape the way we do everything. Yeah.
So what would be an example of that then? Because I think that's how I see the future too, in terms of like lending and stuff. So like what would be an example of that be for us in terms of like buying something and then paying it back in installments?
Yeah, it kind of looks similar, but it's like a bank would buy the home that you want to buy. You come to them, you say, "Hey, I want to buy this home, and can you finance it for me?" The home's $1 million. They say, "Okay." They get the money, they buy the home, they own the home, and then they basically have a legal agreement where you can live there, and you start to pay that loan off. And they charge you. They say, "Okay, well, the loan is a 20 or 10-year term, and the entire term you're going to pay us 1.2 million." And so that essentially becomes the interest rate,
Right.
but it's actually just paid out monthly, and it actually has a total cost. It's sort of a more transparent sort of like the asset is here first, but you could recalculate that as like, oh, I'm paying this amount of interest annually. But the asset is already owned, right? And then it's just transferred upon completion of the installments.
And I think that's honestly one of the biggest problems that people have in terms of like financial literacy is like they'll see a house on the market for $500,000 and they think that's all they're going to pay for it. And then of course they get a mortgage with it and they probably end up paying over $1 million, I guess, depending on what the interest rate is at the time. But like you probably end up paying more than $1 million for that house between the principal payments, which everybody is aware of, you pay off your loan, but there's also interest every month. And that interest accrues, right? Like if you miss a couple payments or whatever, like so I think that makes more sense in terms of just being more transparent. And even though it is similar, somebody's still taking risk there. And you have to be rewarded for that risk. Like in that situation for us, like the bank's taking on the risk there.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to get something for that.
It's shared risk. It's shared risk as opposed to just complete borrower risk. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, that just people could figure this out yourself, but like, it'd be interesting to see how much the cost of a house is when you factor in interest. It's almost double, I think, like with like a normal 3, 4, 5% interest rate. But people don't see that.
No, they don't. And there's places that have that type of financing. There's banks where they like strictly only do like Islamic finance, and in the same country, it's not like it's complete, Shahir law or whatever it is. There's dual financing. So there's sort of like a Western option. You go to one bank and get the Western option, and then one bank with the Islamic option, and they're comparable. Like you could get cheaper here or cheaper there. Like, so it does technically work in that way. I don't know. I'm looking more into it. I'm going to generate sort of a thesis and a video concept about like, because I'm trying to figure out like what the future looks like, the future of financing looks like on a Bitcoin standard. I think it does fundamentally shift. Like, what do we have now as an example that does work? And it seems to me that shared risk and asset ownership ahead of time fits more in line with Bitcoin because you don't have money creation in that moment.
Right. There's no money creation. It seems much less predatory too.
Yeah.
I don't see banks giving out credit cards, for example.
Yeah, it'd be more line of credit, right?
Yeah. Or like asset-backed line of credit. So let's say you have Bitcoin, you can borrow. I mean, if you have Bitcoin, you'd probably just, I mean, if Bitcoin's money, that's the world we're going into, right? We're not, I'm thinking like after Fiat is dead, where you can just have Bitcoin, you can take it wherever you want to. In certain places, you can spend that Bitcoin. In that case, if you're borrowing Bitcoin, I think that it would be banks lending only to businesses that are creating more value rather than to individuals to buy whatever they want to. So I don't think there's going to be mortgages. I think people are just going to buy houses by saving for them. Does that sound
There's
crazy? Like, I don't know. When I was at the Vegas conference last year, and I was on a panel, and I was talking to Nick Bhatia, and he made it sound like he made me sound like I was being crazy because he said fiat always has to exist. But maybe what do you guys think? Do you guys think that's a possibility?
So I think that fiat tokens might be around for a long time, but I think the world where people can just save up for a house might be faster coming than people think. First,
Yeah.
because Bitcoin will suck up the monetary premium out of real estate. And the second thing is AI plus robotics will drastically bring down the cost of making a home. Now there's a lot of humans and a lot of labor involved. What if there's no humans and no labors involved in just building a home? So there's like those two kind of forces, AI and Bitcoin at play. I just want to make that one note because what you said, Joe, before about mortgages, I actually made the calculation a couple of months back for my sister. I've not prepared that spreadsheet for public display, but I will display it publicly anyways for you guys. So I don't have, I didn't double check it 3-4 times, but it's basically I made some assumption, I made some cost analysis, and what I tried to figure out, okay, a 600,000 euro home, or like with dollars, you can do it the same way. The full cost after repairs and taxes after 30 years with the calculation in Austria costs you about 1.2 million. So your rough estimation of like from 600,000 to the double is actually true, even though the mortgage total I calculated with I think a 4% fixed one is around like 800,000 or 900,000 or something like that. It was, as I said, disclaimer, I did that on a late evening with my sister, so I reserve the right that thing is totally wrong. But I calculated it, and I was like, okay, you're looking at around double the cost of the actual buying cost after about 30 years with taxes, repairs, all the things that is in there. Like you need a lawyer signing the contract with you and like weird things like that. And so you make around like 300,000 in profits after this 30 years, if we assume real estate is going up in the same rate as it is going now. And there I try to calculate how much an other asset has to go up when I invest the principal, not in real estate down payment, but I invested in an S&P 500, something that gives me 5-7%. I didn't even calculate it with Bitcoin. Obviously, Bitcoin is a lot better and makes sense. But I think the number was around 6 or 7% or 8%, something like that. If an asset goes up by more than, let's say, 8%, it makes more sense to invest in that asset and rent versus buying the home. But yeah, as Rashad said, like just like make those calculations yourself, see what your dream home costs. Like it's an individual basis, and it's also different even for country to country with taxes and all of that, because there's a lot of variables to that whole calculation.
And I mean, I don't know. I think this is a really interesting conversation because like when we look at that, you say, okay, well, the listing price of this house was 600,000. At the end of it, after 30 years, you end up paying 1.2 million, which nobody has any idea that they're actually going to be paying 1.2 million for that house. Like crazy. This is so crazy to me because I used to be a CPA. I worked in an accounting firm for 10 years. And I remember having a conversation with a guy, another accountant, another CPA, where this is like our full-time job is to kind of understand how finance works. And he did not realize how much he was actually paying for his mortgage. And this is a CPA. This is a pretty well-educated in the financial world guy. And he had no idea how much his house actually cost in terms of both the principal and the interest. And like Sin said in the chat, plus you work in property taxes into that. There's upgrades. And so to me, I think it's a very interesting thought experiment to play through in your own head is like, if you don't actually ever own the house anyways, is it worth it to pay off the mortgage? If you can get a mortgage at like 3, 4, 5%, instead of using those proceeds to pay off your house, instead just put that in something like Bitcoin that's going to appreciate more than 3 or 4 or 5% over 30 years. Like, what's really the point of paying off your mortgage if you don't actually ever really own the house?
Yeah, the only reason is that you think that you can't outperform the interest rate that you have to pay. Yeah, the total amount because of the mortgage, as Robin said, is maybe roughly double what you initially what the listing of the home is, but that's the only way that it sort of ends up making sense is if you take on massive leverage with low interest rates, and then the home appreciates because of the relative scarcity and maybe artificial scarcity based on regulation and what the government decides. Hugely so risky to buy a home. Everybody just thinks it's the normal thing you should do. But it's a lot riskier than people realize. I did kind of want to go back to something Rajat said about your conversation you had with Nick Bhatia. I can't figure out a future where there's a reason to have fiat if there's Bitcoin. So the reason to have fiat really is that merchants would demand fiat like they do now, right? Anywhere you go, the reason to have fiat is because that's what people want. So you spend with fiat. So, and then there's also like the financial rails to move the fiat over debit and credit systems. But if Bitcoin becomes more and more adopted and more people demand it, that sort of takes away from that side. You can use Lightning, Spark, Arc, on-chain, final settlement. There's financial rails there. And the only other reason to have fiat is for extraction of value through money printing. So if you take away some of those or you diminish the usefulness of fiat in those ways, why would anybody have a use case for fiat? I can't really wrap my head around that when Bitcoin is just so much better. So like, I don't know what you guys think about that, but I don't see I see a maybe far away future. I don't know when, but I see a future where fiat doesn't exist.
Well, they can't coexist forever. That's the thing.
That's what I believe. Yeah.
They just can't. But I think in the meantime, I agree with you, Forrest. Like, that's kind of what I think. I've thought about this a lot, and I keep going through these different scenarios of like, okay, would it be valuable in this case or this case or this case? I think the most valuable reason for it is because governments and centralized entities still want to maintain some sort of control, but that doesn't mean it's valuable or useful to anybody other than them. And I think that probably within the next couple of years, this is just my prediction. I might be wrong about it, but timeline wise, but eventually the fiat dollar is going to be exposed for what it is. There's going to be a country that comes out, issues energy backed or resource backed or whatever it is dollar. Everybody else is going to look at it like, holy shit, what did they just do? Because ours really was worth nothing other than a signature on a piece of paper. But then I think it starts kind of a cascade of like asset accumulation to try to back their currencies. But I still don't know where that really leads to, because eventually you still want to hold Bitcoin over those currencies.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the problem, right? Like people, like nations have tried that, like but it always ends up with corruption, because then there's just this massive honeypot of government controlled assets to back the currency
Resources.
And they extract that, right? If it's an oil backed currency like energy, right, as we see it now, they're going to have some trade deals where they siphon that off and sell it to the Exxon or whoever, right? And it's just it ends up being this, get as close to the pile of money or the pile of energy that's backing this as possible, and you'll benefit. So it becomes this crony capitalist system of centralized wealth. I don't know. I think that's probably going to happen though. Like, I think that, okay, like the jig is up, fiat is bullshit. We're back in this thing, or it's a Bitcoin backed dollar, but you can pay your taxes in it or whatever. So there's demand for that. And it's just, that's only going to be for a little while. And then boom, corruption, because people are people and people get into power, and then they start to manipulate the wealth that's near them. And then boom, that's found out, and people, how many rugs need to happen before people realize there's Bitcoin, right? Like there's those stupid engagement tweets that are like, Solana is full of this and ETH is full of this. Like meme coins are dead. Where's the next community? And it's like, Bitcoin, you absolute freaking buffoon. Like it's the only one. It's the only one
It's the
you
only
need.
one. It really is.
Yeah. So I think it's just like, they're going to keep trying to make you side hop to something else. That's something else. But it just ends up at the end of the day, like the sooner you adopt Bitcoin, the better off you and your family and everyone around you is going to be.
Think
And I
about a
think
country like let's just use Bhutan as an example, because they've actually been mining Bitcoin and stacking Bitcoin and actually using that Bitcoin to pay for their infrastructure costs, to pay for the government. That's kind of what Bitcoin's for. It's like, okay, we can use our natural resources. We can turn that into Bitcoin. We can store our value in Bitcoin. And when we need to spend it, we can. Like that's an ideal world that Bhutan's already kind of living through. And Buck52 in the chat said that kind of sounds like something to start a war over, which is absolutely right. That's kind of what we're talking about here. Like if there's a country with a lot of resources, they're going to be a very prime target in a world where currencies are backed by that energy. Right. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now. And we've seen that in the past. And that will continue happening because whoever has the bigger gun, they're going to end up with those resources. And the cool thing about Bitcoin is like that changes that whole dynamic. That's what the whole software book is about, like big picture wise. It's like you can now essentially, that's the power, is having Bitcoin in self-custody so that you can't be censored, so that you can't be debased, so that you can't be blown up, so that you can't be attacked. Because like, think about it, Bhutan, if they got like, say 500,000 Bitcoin and a much more powerful government like the US comes along and says, hey, Bhutan, bullying them, give us your Bitcoin or else. And Bhutan's like, or else what? What are you going to do? Who are you going to attack here? Like that's a totally different thing than if they had a big oil reserve or a big, gold, copper, so whatever you want to call reserve there. You can just attack that. You can take that over. You can blow it up. You can get rid of it. But with Bitcoin, you cannot do that. It's a much different thing.
Yeah, you could see pretty interesting, like multinational multi-sigs, like nations that trust each other. They each have a key from each other. There's sort of a mutual assured. We each got a gun pointed at each other, kind of situation. Like it could get pretty interesting with Bitcoin being able to be protected by a sovereign nation.
I think it will come naturally, but I wouldn't discount for how long this fiat game can still be played. I agree with you guys, like 100%. It cannot be played for an infinite amount of time. There has to be a stop. There has to be at some point where the network effect and the domination of Bitcoin is just too big, and the ecosystem is also too good for people like, why don't I just use the Bitcoin thing? Like, why do you need your government token? And it will be a gradual shift, and it will be very different in different countries, as the same with the internet revolution. I mean, there are still countries where there's no internet there. There it will be also harder for Bitcoin to actually get adopted. So it will probably go faster in countries like the USA, or like maybe small countries like Bhutan or like El Salvador, and it will be harder in other countries. I mean, North Korea might be a harder country for Bitcoin to spread than it's in the USA. So there is different paces to that. It's not like the world switches together, but I think it's just a matter of time. And I'm not sure if I live so high that I can see a world where like most countries operate on a Bitcoin standard, and fiat is kind of like I had people.
Robin, can it drag out that long though?
I don't know. Like I'm already fascinated by how long fiat already runs.
Yeah,
like,
that's fair. But I mean, Bitcoin's pretty new. And I just feel like we're kind of at the point now where there's just so much information available. And I agree that there's going to be some countries that really get locked out of it because their government is so tyrannical. But like, it's kind of the same thing with Caitlin Long, where she wanted to open up that bank that was 100% backed by their reserves. And they're like, you can't do that. And she's like, why? And I don't know if they gave her the reason why, but it's like, because then everybody would use your bank and it would make this old system obsolete. So that's what it really is to me, is like, as soon as there's one country like the US or Russia or China, India, that says, hey, we're done with this fiat stuff. We're going to actually back our currency by something. I mean, BRICS has been talking about it for a while, but it hasn't really got anywhere. But like, it just takes one, and then all the capital kind of flows into that. And that's what we've seen in Bitcoin. Like, think about how much capital has flowed into Bitcoin because it's just a better system, and people aren't stupid. You can't shut this thing off now. And I think it's, I agree, and Robin, in the sense of I really have no idea, and it could be longer. Don't underestimate these bozos. But at the same time, I don't think it can take that long, just because of that reason. Is like, capital flows very efficiently where it's wanted the most. And I think that that's what's going to play out.
I still kind of think that it's going to happen through the entities that don't have as much privilege in the financial system and don't have as much ability. Like, you can see this as a microcosm within the corporations that have adopted Bitcoin, the public corporations. They've all been zombie companies except for Block, maybe, and Tesla. But Tesla, was kind of years ago, and they're sort of like more of like in the startup phase and kind of stuff like that. But so it's more of just like an accelerator of volatility within their stock, and it's relatively small position compared to their market cap anyway. But you look at Semler, you look at Strategy, you look at all these companies, they're all or Metaplan is another prime example. These are companies that are actively failing and grabbing onto Bitcoin as a lifeline, and they don't have good access to capital markets. They're not treated well by the fiat printer comparatively to other companies, much better than you or I, because they're still within that sort of public ecosystem. But the same thing could be said about El Salvador, right? El Salvador was able to adopt Bitcoin because they don't have their own fiat printer at all. They're on the US dollar. They're sort of, the IMF is bullying them around. Might as well take a shot on this thing, right? It's people, companies, nations that are doing really well for sort of the people in power. They don't want to disrupt the status quo, right? They want the musical chair. They want the music in musical chairs to keep playing. They never want to sit down on those chairs. They never want to not have a chair to sit on. They just want the music to keep playing. So it's really the disenfranchised, the people who probably don't like, I think the vast majority of Bitcoiners are probably like, not trusting of systems that exist within their world. And that's what led them to Bitcoin for the first place, right? So I think it's going to continue to be that for quite a long time. It's kind of changing with like BlackRock and Morgan Stanley, and these sort of the ETFs could be like a signal of that sort of changing. But I think that's also just like, this is an asset we can capitalize on. We can maybe centralize some of it. Maybe that'll give us some power in the future. Take away from people having self-custody, which is sort of part of the real revolutionary aspect of this asset. So you could kind of look at it that way, but I think it's still going to continue to be the disenfranchised that adopt Bitcoin, actually.
And it's I think it ties also, because someone just asked if we already talked about retirement, but I actually think it's really ties into retirement. we deviated a little bit, but honestly, I think it ties in really nicely, because if you are in a situation where you have the wealth and the means to actually retire right now, I wouldn't count a lot of my wealth on fiat denominated assets, even though I might think that this fiat thing can go on for a very long time. It can also be over in a very short amount of time. Once, like, the whole fiat system works because people still trust it. There's nothing backing it. There's like nothing behind that other than like the trust of the people that still have the trust in that system. And especially with money, especially now with the internet and how connected we are, once the trust really gets lost and the message gets out, this can go very fast, very quickly. And so I wouldn't count on my retirement if it's denominated a lot in US dollar. That's why I love, for example, the stretch product. It's an amazing thing, but I wouldn't put all my life savings in there and retire on that, because that keeping it at $100 might just not be anything. And then the dividend payment is also not a lot. And so having most of your retirement in Bitcoin is really, really important. And that's what I always come back into this retirement thing. If you're going to retire, you kind of have to retire on Bitcoin. That's like even your only chance of you even going ahead and doing that. So yeah, might try to tie back to retirement.
I noticed.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I was gonna say. I was doing some research on countries that are removed from SWIFT. So back to what Jor was saying, where and like Forrest, I think you were saying it as well. But where countries that are not involved in the current financial system are the ones who are going to create the innovation that pulls Bitcoin in. And there's actually some pretty big countries that have been sanctioned, and they can't connect with the legacy, the entire world for transacting. And I just searched quickly, why is it that it happens? So it says here, countries that are excluded from the SWIFT system primarily as a severe multilateral economic sanction to isolate them from the global financial system, usually following severe breaches of international law, military aggression, and threats to international security. So if you think about it, let's just think about what's happening right now. I don't want to make this political at all. I don't know what you guys think about what's happening, but there are attacks going on. And one of the countries that is sanctioned is Iran. But Iran didn't do anything in this. They didn't start anything. So why is it that they're sanctioned, but the U.S. isn't? Like it just feels like when you kind of think about that, when you kind of try to connect the dots, it kind of makes me think like, oh, maybe the current financial system is designed to keep countries from rebelling.
Well, does Iran have a central bank?
I don't know if they have a central bank, but it says that they've been disconnected since 2012. Let me search.
I don't think that they have a central bank.
So,
well, they had their own currency though that was hyperinflated,
right,
during the revolts.
Maybe they're not like part of the IMF structure, the London banking system.
Yes.
I think that they're detached from that.
They do have a central bank. I just searched for it. They have a central bank, and it was established in 1960.
Yeah, I think you're right though that they're definitely not like they're part of like the whole London banking and everything.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that they are.
Yeah. So when you connect all those dots, why is it that we're so desperate to keep the system going? Because it's not working. People can't even afford houses. Like everybody's struggling. People are living in tents. Why do we want the system to keep going? And the people who could benefit the most from it are the ones who are arguing against it. I get so many comments when I talk about Bitcoin. I get so many comments saying, "Oh, Bitcoin's a scam. Fiat is the way to go." And Fiat is the scam. Like it's so obvious to you. It's so obvious to us that Fiat is a scam, but people just don't want to accept it. They just want to say that Bitcoin is a scam. They just want to say Bitcoin is something that we shouldn't have. So the other countries that are excluded are Russia, Belarus, Iran, North Korea, and Syria. So all these countries.
Belarus is.
Yeah.
What they do is piss them off.
Belarus is just too connected to Russia. It would be.
Oh right. Okay, that makes sense.
From Russian oil and natural gas can go to Belarus really easily, and they could just sell it through Belarus, and it could all go back to Moscow. So that's why they sanctioned them as well.
I'm pretty sure Iran's actually been accepting. I don't know if it's Bitcoin or cryptos or if they differentiated, but I'm pretty sure that's how they've been taking payment for oil.
Robin, you mind sharing my my tweet there? Yeah, and I think that's largely going to be what happens, right? I think this is what's going to happen is these sanctioned countries, crypto, Bitcoin specifically, as the largest, most liquid, most stable assets that can't be seized, right? Like you could argue stable coins are sort of filling that use case, and they might be, but it's still like, I mean, so much tether is being frozen, right? all the time. So it's not censorship resistant like Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is a neutral network with more volatility than that. So there's trade-offs there. So we'll probably see a mix of a bunch of different stuff, including probably the Hawk-Tuah coin, as I joked here. But this just makes sense, right? This makes sense for nations that are exempt from this, that pushed out of the financial system. They have to find an alternative. It's sort of like there's been talks about like a BRICS kind of thing, and using one of their currencies or using a basket of their currencies and goods and services and stuff. But then who controls all of that? Who has that wealth? If it's backed by some real world assets, all of that, it ends up being like, can this dictator trust this dictator, basically, which probably not, right? That's going to fall apart. So the system already exists, and it's really just about adopting it and then forcing other people to adopt it. If you're at a checkpoint trying to extort these oil tankers, or a toll booth trying to say, hey, pay your toll to get your oil tanker through the strait, download the Coinos wallet and fund it with some Bitcoin. And that's like, these people are onboarding people. Like, I mean, that's part of the challenge, but yeah.
That's realistic though. Like I could actually see that happening.
It's pretty funny.
Like not that exact scenario, but like how much sense does it make to be operating, especially where everything is right now? Like it just seems like all the rules have kind of gone off the table, whether it's a constitution, whether it's international law, whatever it is. And again, kind of going back to the software thesis there, is that's what it is. It's like, okay, here's a law written in from 200 years ago, but here's a network secured by one. What are we at now in terms of hash power? Zettahash?
Zettahash, yeah.
Here's one zettahash of power. What's going to win? Or here's whatever it is. It's real power versus abstract power, and those all contracts and laws and like where the world is right now. Those work great when people are getting along, but when they're not, it's all out the window. And so when a country doesn't have the ability to sell their prime assets for this in the system, they find another way to do it. And then other countries say, hey, why are we still using the US dollar? We're not that, why don't we just use Bitcoin? Why don't we just use Hawk-Tuah coin? We're just joking about Hawk-Tuah coin, but it's this, it just makes sense. Who decides this? And somebody in the chat said, I can't wrap my head around who really controls and affects the price most. Oh, the price. The big bad banks or the sovereign nations. The price of what? Bitcoin? What do you guys think they mean by that?
Probably the price of Bitcoin.
Probably. It's buyers and sellers. And
it's hard to argue that.
On top of that.
Yeah. I just think there's a big mismatch in terms of knowledge. But people are going to see this. Like Forrest said earlier, people are going to get rugged and they're going to look for an alternative. People are going to get locked out of the SWIFT system. They're going to find an alternative. People are going to have their bank accounts frozen. They're going to find an alternative. And as more and more people find that alternative, which is clearly Bitcoin, there's more people fighting for the same amount of units. That's what pushes the price up over time. It's really that simple.
Yep.
Yeah, he said he meant Bitcoin, but he then also said that not just price, but also adoption and value, which is a fun question because what actually brings more people to Bitcoin? Is it because Bitcoin is so good, or because the other system is so bad? I think because the other system is so bad and Bitcoin is good, is an amazing alternative. And so if you then look at what's worse, is it the nation state trying to do things? Is it the central banks doing things? Or is it just the local banks being that bad? It's probably a mixture of all of them. I don't know which one is the main driver driving people towards Bitcoin and self-custody. I've heard a ton of people that got their account frozen or closed or any of those things, and they're like, oh, I'm searching for alternatives now. I've heard people from Russia and Ukraine saying, because of the war, I'm getting into Bitcoin. I've heard because I have friends in Russia and I have friends in the Ukraine, and after the war, they were a lot more susceptible to what I'm saying on Bitcoin. And actually one or two reached out to me and saying all the things that you have said to me now make sense because they lived through it and they saw it. Not just on the Ukraine side, also on the Russia side, actually. It's not just one side. And so what is more driving Bitcoin adoption? I don't know if it matters. All of those things drive Bitcoin adoption. A bad banking system, horrible central banks, and bad governments doing war things. All of them are really pretty bad for, pretty good for Bitcoin. Like pain drives behavior.
Yeah, Bitcoin is an escape. It's the only, like, people that are looking at it for like the price appreciation and stuff, they don't realize that they're actually just escaping from the price depreciation of their dollars. Like, that's really kind of what they're escaping from. So it's sort of like a mind shift there. But I would say that Bitcoin is the solution to all of the problems of fiat. And that doesn't mean that it's like, if it was for the good, like, people would be like, oh, Bitcoin's easier. Well, self custody is not easier than, using a debit card. But, setting up banks and stuff for this business, it's been kind of a nightmare. It's been really annoying. It's pretty easy to actually just throw a QR code up and start accepting money. No one can censor, no one can tell you not to. So in some ways, actually, it is easier. But there are certain things to learn and all of that. So, like, it's the best system that exists. People haven't realized that yet. There's slight learning curves to do that. It's definitely 100% the best. And it's also the fact that everything in the fiat system is so terrible. And like, we have the exposure to the best fiat system being in the West, right? Like, it's the easiest for us to get bank accounts, to get credit cards, to get loans, compared to many other people in the world. And so if Bitcoin is good for us, then it's great for them. So that's the way I see it.
100%. Maybe it's a good time, just for after an hour now, that we make a quick shout out to the BTC Mastermind channel, because I think it's we really got far already. We joked about it before, but I think 400 subscribers, hitting that goal is freaking amazing, especially in the low sentiment, like in the bear markets.
Yeah.
And with just the thing that is currently going on. We also have as many live viewers on the BTC Mastermind channel as we never had before. We have about 25 watching on average the last couple of minutes. So if you watch on any of our other channels, on Rashad's, on mine, on Forrest, on whatever channel you're watching, or even on another Twitter or something like that, we intend to make BTC Mastermind the main channel, the hub, the community, the thing where everything is happening. Also, if you listen to this on replay, you can leave a comment, and this is also a source for me to figure out what comments are, what inputs for the next week I'll give. This topic that we're now discussing, the retirement topic, actually was inspired by a guy that wrote about a retirement question that he had. But really important for everyone that is interested in our conversation to be on the BTC Mastermind channel.
We were joking about it because Robin said, "Oh, it's pretty impressive. We're almost at 400," and I said, "Well, we should be at like 400,000 right now." And I say that not because like I think we're the best at it. I just think that we're talking about the most interesting topic in history. I would say Bitcoin is like it's the new Ford Model T. It's fire for the first time. It's the equivalent of that, and it's just like, it's amazing to me how few people care. But at the same time, I get it, because that whole system, we've been talking about how it feeds itself. It distracts people. It keeps them busy. It keeps them on the wheel. They don't have time to hop off the wheel, study money, study Bitcoin, study what's really going on. So shout out to the people who are here, and a special shout out to the people who are watching on the BTC Mastermind channel right now.
Yeah, definitely head over there. It's where the chat is really happening. Otherwise, like, we have to have each channel's video up and commenting on YouTube to reply to you guys in the chat. Just not something that's realistic. There's lots of comments I'd like to have replied to, and I just can't go to Robin's channel and Rajat's channel and George's channel to go over there and reply to them all individually. So if we get everybody over on there, we can have a concentrated chat, and that's going to improve the show a lot, and improve your experience as a viewer as well.
One question that everyone asks in the retirement topic, and something that people always keep asking, but there is not a really good answer for that. Maybe one of you three guys have a good answer for that, is how many Bitcoin to retire? For me, clearly there is not a number, but like an explanation of how you might be able to get to a number. How do you guys think about that? And I think Rashad said also something earlier, that you have a framework to think about how to retire 10 years earlier, something like that. Maybe that's also interesting.
Yeah. So the way that I look at it, you have to think about your expenses. You have to think of your income. You have to think about what your life is like right now. If you want to maintain that life, if you want to make it better, if you want to have some kind of lifestyle inflation, all that stuff is very important to know. And if you can put all that together, and then you can get a number, it's possible. Where the way that I look at it, you want to have 20 times your annual expenses as your Bitcoin stack, just to be conservative. Because if Bitcoin falls 50, 60%, you don't want to have to sell like 40% of your stack to pay for your expenses that year. If you have 10 times, then that's going to be the case. But if you have 20 years of expenses, you can technically, you can sell 5%. Let's say, for example, you have 20 times your Bitcoin, your expenses as your Bitcoin stack. You can sell 5% of your stack to pay for your expenses, and your stack will grow more. So let's say it grows 20%, you have a 15% growth even after you sold 5% of your stack. I think that's the way to look at it. If you look at it from that perspective, I think the possibility of having to go back to work once you retire is, I don't think you're gonna have to go back to work, to be honest. Unless you choose to go back to work, you can borrow against your Bitcoin. You can buy things like STRC. You can do something that creates cash flow, but you probably don't have to go back to work at any point. And the exact amount of Bitcoin really relies on your expenses. So if you have, let's say, $5,000 of monthly expenses, you'll need a certain amount of Bitcoin. If you have $10,000 worth of expenses, you'll probably need double. And it also depends on what you think the inflation rate is going to be. If inflation is going to be 2%, then you need a certain amount of Bitcoin. But if inflation is going to be like 15%, then you need way, way, way more Bitcoin. I think that it's all personal. I think it's possible to run the numbers for yourself. Actually, that's what a lot of people, I think probably for you guys as well, Jor and Forrest, that's what a lot of people have been booking meetings with me for, just to get those numbers. And I had to make a video explaining what your retirement number is. I think that was super valuable, and just helping people to figure out where they need to be planning for how much Bitcoin they need to have.
Could we look at that? Like, could we let's just assume our audience is like 40 years old, wants to retire in 10 years. Because I mean, I agree with you. Like, it really depends on your age, your income, and I guess where you are too. And what your lifestyle is.
Yeah.
So I think, could we look at like a 40-year-old who wants to retire in 10 years, who has, sufficient income? Maybe they don't have a whole lot of income coming in, but they're not going to have to sell their stack, I guess. What number would that be for like a 40-year-old?
Oh yeah. Okay. So let's see. I can share my screen here. So the way that I look at it, let's say, for example, if you don't buy any more Bitcoin, if you buy $0 worth of Bitcoin, how much Bitcoin would you need? Okay. So if you buy $0 worth of Bitcoin, your monthly expenses are 5K. How much Bitcoin would you need to have 20 times your monthly expenses in your stack? So years of savings, essentially. 20 times means 20 years of savings. So if you have today, let's say you have 20 Bitcoin. Today, 20 Bitcoin will give you 22 years of savings if you have $5,000 of monthly expenses. So in that case, today, if they wanted to retire today, they'd need 20 Bitcoin. But let's say they wanted to. That's not actually. I agree with you. It does sound low.
No, I was joking. That's a lot of freaking Bitcoin.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if anybody watching this would have 20 Bitcoin.
Right, but I feel like there are people out there who have more than this, and they're still thinking, "Can I retire on this yet?"
And that's retiring today, right?
Right.
That's not the example of a 40-year-old. A 40-year-old,
right,
maybe 60, 65. So
yeah,
that's
so
20
let's
years from now.
Yeah, so let's see what that would look like. So let's say, for example, they have 1 Bitcoin today. In 20 years, so 2026 to 2040.
I want 10 years.
10 years. Okay, 10 years. So 2036, that one Bitcoin will be worth, well, based on what the price is right now, this is with a 10% growth. So what I'll do is what do you guys think should be the growth?
21.
21%. Okay, 21%. So 21% growth. You have one Bitcoin. That one Bitcoin grows from 68K to 460K. And you'll have 4.7 years of savings.
Okay.
So we'll go 4 Bitcoin.
That's not bad.
Like 4.2, actually, 4.2. So 4.2 Bitcoin 2036 would be worth 1.932 million. Your annual expenses would have gone from 60K to 97K. In terms of Bitcoin, they would have gone from 0.87 Bitcoin. And I think this is actually really special. So they would have gone from 0.87 Bitcoin to 0.21 Bitcoin per year, which is pretty crazy. But your expenses in dollar terms have gone up, but they've gone down 80% in terms of Bitcoin. So
But what if I wasn't spending any of my Bitcoin?
So if you weren't spending any, so you'd want to borrow against it?
No, I just let's say that I just had a stack of Bitcoin, but I also have like an income coming in for the next 10 years. So I don't have to use my Bitcoin or sell my Bitcoin. I can just keep that point. Oh, that's expensive. Sorry, Rajat. Sorry.
No,
I think I got confused there.
So this is
I
based
still
on,
have my
let's say,
stack. Gotcha.
let's say you have 4.2 Bitcoin. Let's say, for example, you've been stacking, you have 4.2 Bitcoin. And then you're like, I'm not going to buy any more. I'm just going to live my life for the next 10 years. I think that's what you mean, right?
Yeah, I didn't mean that, but that probably makes more sense.
So they still have an income. They're still spending on what they need to, and they're still working, but they just have 4.2 Bitcoin and it's just sitting on the side. It's in cold storage. With 4.2 Bitcoin, they'd be able to retire by 2036. So they have 20 times their annual expenses. You can see that here, 20 times, 19.77 times. But then on top of that, let's say your annual expenses are 100K. Where is that? Annual expenses are 100K on column K, 97.7K. If you wanted to borrow against your Bitcoin, you'd be able to borrow against 10% of your stack with 50% LTV. So you're giving them 180.
Not have to sell it.
Sorry?
Then you wouldn't have to sell any of it.
Then you wouldn't have, exactly. Then you wouldn't have to sell it.
Okay, so you're borrowing on 10% of your stack. It'd be really interesting to see how much, if you borrowed on 10% of your stack 1 year, how much you would have to borrow percentage-wise of your remaining stack the next year. That's not what that's calculating, though. That's individual years, right? This is
individual years. But what you could do is, like, let's say, for example, you could have like a barbell, or not a barbell, a ladder, where you borrow 1 year, and then you borrow against again the next year, and then you borrow again the next year. You use your collateral, and you set it up in a way where you don't have to give the bank too much of your Bitcoin. So let's say you do this when you can pay. Okay, so in this case, let's say you do this when 5% of your stack is enough to pay for your monthly expenses. So 5% as collateral, you give the bank 5%, they give you fiat, and then you pay for your expenses. So where would that be? Your expenses would go to 118K by 2040, 130K by 2042. So 130K 2042, you'd be able to borrow against 5% of your stack at a 50% LTV. You'd be able to get 150K. So you could pay for your expenses in 2042. But then what you could do is, let's say first year you borrow against 5%, then the next year you borrow against another 5%, then the next year you borrow against another 5%, and then the fourth year, and then the fourth year you borrow against another 5%, and then the fifth year you can basically go back to the initial 5% that you borrowed against, and you can borrow more against it. Does that make sense?
But basically what you're saying is 4.2 Bitcoin if you want to retire in 10 years.
In 10 years, if you just want to sell some of your Bitcoin and you want to retire, then yeah, 4.2 Bitcoin. But let's say, for example, if Bitcoin grows faster, let's say it grows at Saylor's estimate of 29%, when would you reach 20 times your expenses? You'd reach 20 times your expenses in 2033.
And then we're also talking about like how long can this fiat system still go on? Because if a fiat system collapses, like all of those things make a lot. That's what I'm always saying with Bitcoin. If if we try to predict where you can retire in 5, 10, 15 years from seeing the past, that's reasonable and that's conservative. But then we also talked before, like, how long can this fiat system still go on? Like, what if we collapse like really quick in the Bitcoin? But I think we should not count on that. I think if you want to plan your personal finances, you should never count on the fiat system collapsing into Bitcoin in like 2030 or 2035 or something like that. And like, oh, then with 0.1 Bitcoin, it will still be fine. Because like, if you count like all the global wealth and Bitcoin, all of that. But I like your calculator a lot. It gives you a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, it's all based on your personal situation, right? And I actually did the calculation there. If Bitcoin grows at 29% per year, you could actually retire in 2036 with 2.2 Bitcoin. You'll have 20 times your annual expenses.
Wow. Yeah. And as you said, Robin, you don't want to, you want to be conservative with these kind of calculators. You don't want to predict. I mean, predicting the future is impossible. So being as conservative as possible allows you more flexibility with whatever the future ends up looking like. But most likely, I mean, in my opinion, like sort of the global stuff that's going on right now is all an excuse for a massive print. They just need an excuse to print more money, basically. So, I mean, whether that's the reason they caused it or not, they're going to take advantage of the chaos and print money because that's what they always do. So, you know, is it the chicken or the egg kind of thing there? But so if you look at the way debt works, if you look at the option they have, which is printing money, things get worse over time, which means that it sort of it accelerates, right? The fiat collapse. And yeah, it looks like it could take way longer, but these things sort of spiral, right? It's sort of like a S-curve moment, and it's impossible to predict that. But I do think that's in the cards. I think that's potentially possible in who knows what time frame, and that would mean that you likely have a lot more Bitcoin than you actually need, which is totally possible as well, especially if you're being conservative with these calculators.
Yeah. And Forrest, like I think this is what you're referring to. The debt keeps growing, and it's growing exponentially. It's growing faster and faster.
Exactly.
This is just a reason to print, like you said. The war is just a reason to print.
Yeah,
printing is coming. You just don't know when. At some point, it will.
Yeah, it's just another reason to spend money. Yeah, I mean, it's a terrible thing because war is terrible, but there's people that are going to take advantage of that, right? There's people that are going to just say, you know, spend. It doesn't matter what it costs, right? There's sort of this. Well, figures get sort of like followers who believe them no matter what, and they'll make any excuse for them, and they'll just say, you know, I wasn't for this before, but now we have to because of the situation we're in. And yeah, I mean, I made a tweet the other day that said, without politics, war is just murder on an aggregate scale. But with politics, it's usually just money laundering and a way to divvy up other people's wealth. And that's what war is, right? War is just a reason to extract value, to spend, like every missile the US fires is like $1.5 million or something. Where's that money coming from and who's it going to? Right? It's going to the military industrial complex, and it's coming from the taxpayers, and the taxpayers aren't funding the government enough. So then it's coming from debt, and nobody wants the debt enough. So the Federal Reserve puts the debt on the balance sheet. And where does the Federal Reserve get that money? They print it out of thin air. So it all leads to money printing.
I mean, I don't know how to say this or not, but like, I don't think we should underestimate the ability for fiat to collapse, because I think if fiat collapses, all these calculations are completely out the window. Like if fiat collapses, if you had 1 million sats today, you could probably retire tomorrow on it. That just the sats are going to have that much purchasing power in that world.
Yeah.
I've done calculations on homes, on commercial buildings, on acres of land, on freaking sports teams, on the Meg 7 shares outstanding. And like the amount, if you price things in Satoshis, it is very, very little. like very little. And so I see some people in the chat here saying, can we do realistic numbers like having zeros? Again, we're kind of predicting the future based on the world that we come from, right? It's kind of like somebody in the early 1900s trying to predict how many highways there would be, and there would be self-driving cars while they were still driving around with horses. Like we really have no idea, and what kind of impact this system and really a whole paradigm shift is going to look like. We're still basing everything on fiat. And to me, again, I say this every week, but like fiat has already collapsed. It's gone to zero. And it's just a matter of time till that happens. So yeah, I mean, looking out 30 years, if fiat's still somehow kicking around, we're going to be fine. But if it happens any faster, you're really not going to need that much Bitcoin to live like a freaking king, no matter what country you're in.
Yeah,
I think that's a really good point.
Everybody wants.
I did a quick calculation. Like, let's say, for example, if we do have an extremely bullish scenario where Bitcoin grows at 55, or sorry, is it 50 or 55? Bitcoin grows at 50% per year. If you have 0.38 Bitcoin by 2037, you could retire.
How much? 0.3?
0.38.
Okay. So just over a third of a Bitcoin and
11 years.
11 years.
Let me just show you guys this real quick, because it's kind of mind-blowing. And I mean, here's the thing about it is like, this isn't my opinion. This is like objective math, right? Like, again, we've never had a system before where it's fixed. There's a fixed supply of it. So this is pretty much what I did. I asked AI to come up with these numbers for me. And so I got the total number of acres on Earth, 36 billion. I got 2 billion houses. I got about 175. And these are all very approximate amounts. Like, there's no real way to know this for sure. 175 million commercial buildings, 15,000 sports teams, which I thought was kind of fun to do. And then 85 billion shares of like the Mag 7. So that's like Apple, Tesla, NVIDIA. So there's 85 billion shares outstanding. So in a world where only land existed, you would be able to buy 1 acre of land for 58,000 sats. If the only thing that existed was land. If the only thing that existed was houses, the average price of a house would be 1 million sats.
Wow.
12 million sats for commercial buildings, a lot for sports teams, which, I mean, there's only 15,000 of them, but still, if you look at like the real value, or not real value, but the fiat value of sports teams today, they're in the tens or hundreds of billions. And in Bitcoin terms, that's about 9.5. If only sports teams existed here, we got to remember that these are the maximums. And then the 85 billion Mag 7 shares, that'd be $20 a share for like an Apple, NVIDIA. And again, if only equity existed, there was no houses, no land, nothing else. So like, these are the amounts. This is objective math. So if we go to this world where things are priced in sats, fiat collapses, you're not going to need that many sats at all. Like, what's a tank of gas cost in this world? 5 sats? And it's just going to get cheaper through time.
It's only going to go down. Yeah. Yeah. And even like the 15,000 sports teams, like, you'll have one team that's worth 140 million sats or 140 billion sats there. And then the other teams will be lower and lower because everything else has to take some value. So like, real estate is massively overvalued today. It's, based on Jor's calculations, 1,050,000 sats. That's crazy.
The average house.
Those are similar to the numbers that I've gotten too.
Yeah. Like, you could do this yourself. Like, what you want to do here, like, just take it. The top number is your amount of acres, amount of houses, amount of buildings. And then you divide it by the total number of sats. And that's like, it's math.
And I think the real estate story will be the biggest one. Like, because there's so much wealth in real estate, and it's such a default in almost every region in the world of like, hey, I want to own my own home. I'll get a mortgage for 30 years and all of my income is going in there. And I might have a little bit ETF, I might have a little bit here and there, but like 90+% of my wealth is in real estate. It's such a default of people, and people buy a second home, a holiday home, just so they can not get printed away.
Yeah, right.
And so I think real estate will be I think the biggest story of the capital shift of Bitcoin and AI, because the cost of making real estate will go down and the monetary premium will be sucked out of real estate significantly. If you're a Bitcoiner, you will be affording in 10, 20 years every single home. Like you can just like buy a home that is really amazing. There will be like
From
this
your lightning
prime
wallet.
real estate. Yeah, like there will be prime real estate maybe that like in front of the lakes. It's a beautiful, like those might still have some monetary premium and some kind of value of scarcity in them. But just having a home over your head somewhere, I think it will be dirt cheap.
There's a comment there in the chat from Badman. It says, "How is Bitcoin going to generate yield? Yield
It's
is a
not.
fiat concept, even for houses. Like you get yield from them, but it's because we've forced people to not be able to buy houses. The U.S. government has the banking system has created artificial demand for housing. That's why house prices keep going up, and it's basically created a market of people who can't afford houses and they still need shelter, so they rent houses. It's a manufactured fake economy, and the yield is a part of that.
Yeah.
Like think about it. The risk free rate is just there is no risk free rate. If you want to earn money, you have to take a risk. Otherwise, and that's what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is the risk free asset. It's the asset that you just hold, and it doesn't have a risk free rate because you just hold Bitcoin. You know exactly how much there is. That's the only certain thing that you have. Nothing else is as certain as Bitcoin. We have no idea how much the supply of anything else will be at some point. Whereas with Bitcoin, we know exactly what the supply will be. We just don't know what the demand will look like. And what we're doing here is we're just trying to show you why the demand will go up. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't generate yield. It's about the fact that it's the only asset that's finite, and everybody wants a proper measuring stick that they can rely on that doesn't change every day.
Yeah, and another note there on Bitcoin repricing the world. Those are like four of the assets of the world. It's so incalculable how much everything is worth, and by looking at that and seeing, okay, a home's going to be worth what was it, like 1 million sats or something?
Yeah, average. If only homes existed.
And it was all average. It's just, it's like I see that and it feels inevitable, but you have to have patience. Like that's the main thing here, right? Even like looking at having 0.38 Bitcoin and you can retire in 2037. That seems like it's not that far, but Bitcoin's 17 years old now. That's 11 years. Like that's Bitcoin's almost like 2/3 of Bitcoin's life has to be added to the time right now for that to happen. And that's at a big growth rate. That's a small amount of Bitcoin. So you have to have patience with this. This is going to take a while. And looking back, our ancestors or our future generations are going to read history books about Bitcoin. It's going to seem like it happened like right away. Like we went from gold-backed currency to fiat momentarily to Bitcoin. And it was just this momentary blip of fiat. And it just will feel like it just happened overnight. And that's only looking at it in a historical sense, but it's going to feel like an eternity for you because life is short. So 11 years of your life is pretty significant. And you do need to be patient with this. I think that's a big thing people need to recognize and realize here. And that's at a very optimistic look at price and everything as well, right?
But that applies to everything, right? Even with stocks, people say, "Oh, I'm going to buy stocks because they have yield and they produce something, they create something." Even with stocks, you retire in like 40 years, and even then, you have no idea if you'll be able to retire. You can keep putting $500 away into the stock market every month, and you expect that inflation will be 2%, so you'll be able to retire in 35 years. But inflation is not 2%. And those stocks can fall and then never recover again if the world wants to stop interacting. Like even when you buy, let's say the S&P 500, people feel like it's so diversified, it's this, it's that. But like what's happening right now? The biggest companies in the world are having their data centers attacked. Who would have expected that? That's the risk that you don't have to take with Bitcoin. You don't have to take the risk that Bitcoin's network is going to be shut down because its data center is going to be attacked. no country can shut down Bitcoin on its own.
And this is so true because so if you invest in a company, this can be a good decision if you know the company very well. If you know the industry, you have done your homework, like you can actually have a pretty decent investment there. But if you don't know the company, it's gambling. If you just like buy a company, like, oh, it looks cool or whatever, and you don't do the research, it's gambling. And for me, an S&P 500 or an ETF that bundles companies is just like you're bundling gambling. You like you hope this whole thing will go on, and then there is this whole thought of monetary premium. What if people have an amazing alternative that sucks up all the monetary premium of all other assets? It will naturally people will opt into this one asset. There will be ecosystem around going into this one asset like Stretch. There will be everything kind of coming towards this one asset because it's the hurdle rate. It's the best thing that ever was there. And everything else will lose its monetary premium. Gold, real estate, stocks. Like how much of the value of Apple is because they make amazing phones and they have cash flow and they are great business, and how much of it is people just buy it to flee from inflation? I think it's a very big portion people buying it. I mean, Tesla came up before. Their PE ratio is like 300 or so. Like they have a crazy valuation. I love Tesla, but I just can't buy them because they are already so big and they have a huge PE ratio. I'm like, I was for a long time a Tesla investor, but it's like how sustainable will this be? And yeah, it's so I look very skeptical at stocks in general.
I'm just doing some math right now. I'm trying to figure out what the total value of the Mag 7 stocks are per share. Because I got $20 per share, like in Bitcoin terms. And again, that's only if Mag 7 shares, if that was the only thing in the world, they would still only be like $20 worth of Bitcoin per share of like, you know, if you could own this share of Apple, of Tesla, of Nvidia, of Microsoft, of Amazon, you could get that whole thing for $20 worth of Bitcoin if that's all that existed. Like that's how mismatched these two systems are. And it's not like we're even comparing them here. It's like these things are going to be measured in Bitcoin. Bitcoin isn't competing against Amazon. Bitcoin isn't competing against gold. Bitcoin's not competing against Nvidia. Bitcoin's going to be the thing that measures all of those things. And the amount of sats that they're going to be worth are really going to blow people's minds in you know, a decade or two from now. Because it's just like Forrest said there, it's just going to seem so obvious and such a small thing. But like day to day here, we're watching the fiat price. Bitcoin's not volatile. The thing that's volatile is the fiat system. That's where everybody's losing their mind, emotional. Like Bitcoin, objective math, there's only so high these assets can go in terms of Bitcoin. So it's just a different lens to look at the world through. And I think that if you do this objective math, and if you understand what I'm saying, you realize that you really don't need that much Bitcoin to do very well in this world. On the other side of this,
there's a guy in the chat, Bandman. He's saying that we're backing the wrong asset. I'm not sure what he's telling us to back, but Forrest has been telling him he's wrong. I don't think he wants to get it, but like this. So that's just, I think that's just a lesson that people who don't care about Bitcoin, they're not going to care. Like they just want to. What they're trying to do is they're trying to earn more fiat. They're trying to look at the price and they're trying to quickly outperform Bitcoin. So at some point they're able to buy more Bitcoin. And unfortunately that doesn't happen. So Chris, a good friend of mine, he posted this here. All the sell Bitcoin and buy Zcash people disappeared. All the trade meme coins to buy Bitcoin, to buy more Bitcoin disappeared. All the buy alts to have a better return than Bitcoin people disappeared. Distractions don't look like distractions until they're done distracting you. Exactly what's happening here. Like that guy there, I'm going to tell you guys straight up, that guy's a distraction. He's trying to stop you from figuring out Bitcoin, and go do the research for yourself. The second best coin in the world, the second highest market cap coin in the world, has an infinite supply. The Solana, Ethereum has an infinite supply. Solana has an infinite supply. All the all the stable coins, they all have an infinite supply. The next one would be probably XRP. XRP doesn't even have a full ledger. So whatever he's backing is probably like 10th or below. And it's already lost. Bitcoin's lapped everything like 20 times already. So whatever he's promoting there, you may think that this guy seems confident. He seems like he knows what he's talking about. But in a few months, you're gonna see, okay, this thing is back to going towards zero. Oh, he was an XRP guy. Okay, that makes
There we go.
See, that's the crazy part. I knew it was one of those three: Solana, ETH, or XRP. And
I thought he was a big blocker, but
that was so cool. That could have been it, but like he made it so obvious that he was an XRP guy. Okay.
There's a good question here from Kachak. He said, if we reach a world where the dollar doesn't exist anymore, would capital gains be waived on Bitcoin? I mean, really think through that. Like play that out in your mind. How would you pay capital gains on something if everything's measured in Bitcoin? Like, what would you pay anything for? It'd be like if you were in the US and the value of the US dollar went up, do you have to pay tax on that? No. Because in the world where a dollar doesn't exist anymore, we have a new measuring stick. It's sats. It's no longer US dollars. So what's it going up against? It's not going up against anything. It's just measuring things. And that's what people don't understand when you're talking about yield. It's like you don't need a yield. All you need to do is hold on to those units longer because there's a fixed amount of them. And we're continuously making more houses and more commercial buildings and more equity in companies and more laptops and phones and everything. We're producing more things. And you divide that by the denominator there. And the more things that are produced, the cheaper everything goes. This has been the theme throughout the episode here. So you're not really gaining anything. You're just how you're valuing how you're storing your value is continuously appreciating. That's the yield. You can buy more things with the units that you have. That's the yield, which is technically a yield, but I don't know. It's just such a freaking mind F. Just because we're so used to this fiat system and comparing things to it and measuring things in it and capital gains. But it's like if fiat collapses and all we have is Bitcoin, that's where not all we have is Bitcoin. We're measuring things in Bitcoin. Then how would there be capital gains?
Yeah, it's money. I mean, you don't get taxed for owning and using US dollars. Like there's sort of like these taxes around other things, and that could be the case. Like exchanging from Bitcoin to something else, there could be like a tax on exchanging currencies or something. I don't know, but yeah, it doesn't make sense at a certain point. And game theory suggests that nations want wealth within their nation, and they'll actually there'll be an arms race or a game theory race to not tax Bitcoin, just to get Bitcoiners into their country to provide wealth and economy and jobs by spending their Bitcoin. So that's what they will end up wanting. So I think the terrible tax laws that we see around Bitcoin will start to alleviate. I think I actually see it getting worse for a moment of time as politicians try to like squeeze out as much as they can before people realize, hey, this is ridiculous. I'm just going to move somewhere else. And then I see it actually getting globally on average better.
It's crazy to think about though, because like just play this out in your head. Let's say that we do move to a world, or it's not really even a matter of if, but when we move to a world where everything's priced in sats, and you have a house that's worth 1 million sats. You buy it for 1 million sats, and let's say it even goes up to 1.2 million sats. Then you'd probably pay a capital gain of 200,000 sats because it went up. Because again, you're measuring things in Bitcoin. Just whenever you want to use US dollars, just swap it for sats. But in that same world, because there's no fiat manipulation, there's no money printing, the prices of homes in sats will not go up. They'll go down. So you won't have capital gains anymore. Capital gains are a construct of fiat printing. The only reason why your house went up from 400,000 to 800,000 is because they printed more units. You cannot do that on a Bitcoin standard. And so there'll be no capital gains because the prices will come down when it's measured in sats.
Mhm.
That's an
Yeah.
interesting thought. I've never thought about that. Like, obviously, like we moved to a Bitcoin standard, everything is priced in sats, and naturally, very, very, it's very rare for something to outperform Bitcoin in that situation. Maybe a
But
startup.
Robin, you're not outperforming Bitcoin. You're measuring it in Bitcoin.
Yeah, but like the outperforming is a bad word, but like rising in price against Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. Rising price in Bitcoin terms.
But then
That's going to happen though. That's natural, right? And I mean, that's the prices going up
deflation.
and down. That's natural. That's just how the market works. Because there's always going to be people in the short term who are willing to give you more or less Bitcoin for something. But it's like the U.S. dollar, right? The U.S. dollar, Bitcoin is just they're just competing currencies, right? It's just the price of, let's say, even a house, for example, it goes up and it comes down. It'll continue to do that. But over the long term, I think that's the important trend. Over the long term, prices will always go down in terms of Bitcoin.
But
Measured
the
in
question
Bitcoin,
is
yeah.
then, is there still a capital gains tax? Like, because a company can still go up in price even if it's priced in Bitcoin, if it's more productive. Because if a company stores all this energy in Bitcoin and then on top of that has a productive business that has cash flows, people might still price it higher than what, like it. Bitcoin at that point would not be in separate asset, but like the price of that company per share or per whatever you want to measure it would go up, and then you might still have capital gains tax on that.
Yep. Yeah, like an equity in a company. If the company was, because when you're measuring things in sats, it's going to go up over time. The purchasing power of those sats are going to go up over time, which means the prices in sats are going to come down. And so if the company is growing faster than that rate, then yes, there will be some sort of a capital gain there. If you bought a share for 5 sats and increased to 10 sats, there could be potential for a capital gain there, I guess. But in terms of real estate, like, no, I don't think any of us would think that real estate would be in that category of like appreciating in sats.
Like super rarely. Like I can see some edge cases where there's like a popular area, like something like that. But even that is hard to imagine. Like 99.99% of the real estate, like I don't think so. I couldn't exclude edge cases where there's like some prime real estate that people are just like crazy about, especially once like Bitcoin is settled, because we have to separate Bitcoin now versus Bitcoin when it's a 200, 300, 400 trillion dollar asset, or like comparatively, because then we would measure everything in Bitcoin. So we wouldn't call it a $300 trillion asset. We would just call it Bitcoin and measure all the other assets in Bitcoin. But if Bitcoin is 10x, not 10x, like 100x of the size of today, and then there is next to it like an opportunity with real estate in that world, like 20 years from now, I can imagine for some time, like some prime real estate maybe outperforming Bitcoin. So like prices in Bitcoin going up, but never commoditized real estate, and also never in the next 10 to 20 years, because Bitcoin is getting adopted. But once Bitcoin is getting got already adopted and is at a maturity level, then I can see other assets again having an edge on if you chase the highest performing asset, I guess.
It's a really interesting. I mean, even the four of us, like just consider the fact that the four of us spend pretty much every waking hour of our life in Bitcoin stuff. And it's still difficult to kind of wrap your head around what that system looks like and thinking through the different aspects of it. And I think I said this last week, but like I had to listen to Jeff Booth talk about it for 20 or 25 times before I really started to comprehend what the hell he was talking about. So it's just like you kind of have to just play through these different scenarios in your head and like argue with yourself. It's like, okay, if this happens, what does that look like? Am I just overthinking it? Am I tying it back to fiat still? But it's like it's difficult to discuss just because, again, it's so different than what we're used to.
Yeah, absolutely. So many great topics. I wanna because we're already coming into 2 hours slot. We're coming closer to the end of the stream.
My mind's melting, and these guys are arguing with Bandman in the freaking
Yeah,
comment section.
I'm also
It's funny.
like half of my brain is almost like looking at that amazing conversation. That it's a fun one, but the arguments that he brings up is for me not even worth like bringing up. It's
No,
such
it's
bad
not.
ones. Like it's
It's
crazy.
laughable. It's laughable. Like all you can do at a certain point is just laugh. Like this person just wants to believe something so bad, and it just is starting from a fundamental place of just the wrong incentive, not understanding like how the world works, essentially. Which whatever. It just
You
is
know,
what
like
it is.
the only thing I want to say with that, I feel bad for the person that believes him.
Yeah.
Because there might be a good intentional person that sees this one or two arguments that just if you just take that one argument, it might make sense. Like, oh, like XRP is settling in 3 seconds. Like if you just see that one argument and and you do not have the context of like what this means and why it is not the thing that you might imagine it to be, you might just be the next like Casher, like the next Dogecoin, like the next whatever. It is a like there are a lot of people out there that hear something and just like to act on that, and I'm amazed by that. And so what I encourage everyone to do always is do the research and dive deeper and don't believe all the things people say.
Especially Bandman.
So this is our channel here. We've been sharing it in the chat. It's just BTC Mastermind if you look it up on YouTube. Yeah, we've been talking about the chat again. If we can get everybody over there, eventually we're going to migrate everything over there, and that'll be the only place we live stream. So if you're not subscribed, you might miss that by the time we end up doing that. So if you want to be over there in the chat, you guys can ask questions. You can bring up topics, concerns, anything you want in the chat. If we have it all in one central place, it makes it a lot easier for us.
Awesome. Is there any interesting nugget of information, a tip, or anything that Rashad, Forrest, Joe, you're gonna want to share with the audience that you've learned over the last week that was interesting for you guys?
Good
I would
question.
say just when in doubt, zoom out. I think that's really important because people are probably feeling very stressed out right now about Bitcoin's price. They're probably worried that, in the short term, it's going down. It won't go back down. It won't go back up to 100K until this date or this date. But just think about the long term. Long term, I think everything is going to be okay.
Yeah, and I would say that if you have questions around this, if you're depending on your knowledge of anything, right, ask those questions and figure out the answers to them. There's all the knowledge is out there, so just look into them. Figure out. I think the big thing here is like figure out what people's incentives are, where you get knowledge from, and try to find a varied source of knowledge and people that you respect that you feel like they don't have some incentive of trying to sell something to you. I think is pretty big. So yeah, the questions you have, use them as the trailheads to go explore and go down the trail, figure out the answers to those questions and figure out what answers people are giving you and what their track record are and yeah, where their incentives lie, I think is pretty important. That's what I would do.
I think we got to figure out a way to, like, because there's so many good questions in the chat right now. It's just impossible. I mean, we've been talking for 2 hours here, and we've hardly touched on any questions. So it's kind of tough. I think the one thing that I would say is like there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. Just take a step back, understand that the whole thing's like a show. It's all production. It's all meant to distract you from what's really going on here. and they're pretty effective at it. They have unlimited amounts of money. They pump that into the media. They pump that into the schooling system. They want to try to convince people that their system is red or blue and you have to fight each other. That's not what it is. You can completely opt out of that system. You don't go to the polls and vote for who's going to run the country and decide your fate. You decide it yourself. And I think the one thing that you can do every single day is vote with your attention, vote with your energy, vote with your capital. Instead of being on Twitter, go to Nostr. Instead of being on this one, go to somewhere else. Instead of watching Netflix, work out. You get to decide every single day. You vote with every action that you make in life. And I think the more of us who are voting for decentralization, for a transparency, for a hard money standard, the sooner that's going to happen. And it has nothing to do with the presidents or the prime ministers or any of that shit. They're a dying breed. In my opinion, they're already dead. We're just kind of waiting to see it all play out and measure things in sats.
100%. The last thing I'm gonna add here, because Joe touched on it, I think the best way to capture all those questions that you guys have is probably if you just leave it in the BTC Mastermind channel somewhere in the comments, because in the comments I can go on the YouTube studio and filter contains question. So if you make a question mark and formulate the thing as a question, it comes up when I filter through it, and we can look through that and kind of have that in the future episodes and cover those questions. In the live chat, it's super hard to keep up with, but in the comment section, we have the possibility to do that. So yeah. Thank you so much, guys, for coming on, and we'll be back next week.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.